Good morning, everybody. This is Sharzat Morgan. Today I'm going to attempt to explain to you why there's so much fighting in the Middle East. What is going on with these Palestinian protests, and is it really a genocide? And why are they fighting Israel? Isn't Israel the good guys, our ally? Aren't we the good guys? My perspective comes from basically curiosity because I didn't have a strong dog in this fight. I don't have a religion. I actually am interested in Germany, Iran, and the US because I'm born in Germany. I didn't move to the US until I was 9 years old. My mother is a blonde-haired German woman, also ich rede Deutsch. Ich bin in Deutschland zur Schule gegangen. And my father is Iranian. پدرم من یک کره فارسی یاد یک کره فارسی صحبت میکنم. فارسی من خیلی خوب نیست. So, speak a little bit of Farsi. And I've lived in the US since I'm 9 years old, so I'm pretty much kind of American. I've not been interested in politics at all until a couple years ago when Russia invaded Ukraine. And I started getting curious, and really I knew nothing. I'm not interested in either political party, so I'm kind of a neutral party who got really curious. As a German, I know that the Germans have a lot of shame around what happened with the Holocaust. My grandparents always hated Hitler. I know that the Iranians really like the Shah, at least my family liked the Shah, the US installed Shah. So that's just a little bit of my background as just kind of being a curious, neutral person who is conscientious and wondering why are these people always fighting and why are we always in these wars. So I started following, thank God for YouTube, following different geopolitical analysts who actually live maybe in Syria, London, former military generals and colonels. You guys know who I listen to. Judge Napolitano, the Duran dialogue work, Syriana analysis. And I follow different accounts on Twitter. So, in order for me to follow all these people, the first thing I had to do was get a globe. Because I'm telling you guys, I'm not coming from any angry position, okay? I got really curious. Okay, so the first thing I did was buy a globe. So let's get that out. So before I show you my globe, you have to realize that I'm like post-family. When I was married and I had a house, I had this big globe, nice one with a stand on the floor. But now I'm, empty nester living in an apartment, so I don't have a lot of room. So I bought this little globe, and I like it because it has a light. I can turn it on. And I started following. They were talking about Ukraine. I didn't even know where Ukraine was in relation to Russia. Seriously, even though I'm educated on this, I knew very little. They started talking about Israel and Yemen and Qatar. So I'm like, where are these places? They're saying that Israel can't bomb Iran because they have to fly over Jordan. I'm like, they do? Where is Jordan? Why can't they just bomb Iran? I just had to look all this up, okay? And I didn't realize Israel is this tiny little place in the Middle East, and that Gaza is this tiny plot of land. Okay, when I started following all these people, and I got very interested also in the interviews that the Iranian spokesperson made, Sarat Mohammadi, and I started realizing that we in the US use terminology that the media and the government gives us to make these people look bad and make us look good. For example, I caught myself saying Middle East. Well, the people who live there call themselves West Asians. West Asians. They consider themselves part of Asia. We say Middle East. That's just one example. The other example is that we call countries that we don't like rogue nations, regimes, terrorist regimes, even though they're actual countries. So, what if we called the US a regime? So, the words that we are taught growing up and what we're taught and how the US portrays other countries automatically makes us think that they're lesser. And I was always thinking, why are these people in the Middle East, they're always fighting? They're backwards people. They're portrayed as backwards, and I think a lot of this actually goes to where I'm going to start is with colonialism and the white supremacy, because we are a white supremacist nation. Even though we have incorporated blacks into our society somewhat, we haven't really done much to help them at the grassroots. I mean, sure, once black people have reached education, we let them hold office and have positions, but we don't really do anything for the black people that are still disenfranchised, that are poor. We don't care about them, and we don't care about the Indians that we displaced off the land. And if you look around the world now, there's this sense among the white people, the Europeans and the Americans, that everybody who's not white is less than. Like we have to weaken them. The only exception would be Russia. But we want to take over, so the history of the Europeans and the Americans of colonialism, we had the British Empire, we had the French Empire, and the U.S. So the United States only exists because the white people came over and killed the Indians, did a genocide on the Indians. So this is going to be maybe triggering to people, but we have what we have because we killed off the Indians. We killed the women, we killed the children. And this is like a history of humanity, in other words. We had the Ottoman Empire, the Persian Empire. We've had different empires, the Roman Empire. And these empires were all created not just by soldiers killing soldiers, but I think they actually committed genocide and killed entire civilizations. And what I also learned was that there are still remnants of these empires all over the world. For example, in Cyprus, which is a little island next to Turkey, there are still 4% of Cyprus is still owned by the British because they once owned that whole area. And the British actually have a base on Cyprus that they still own. And the French and the Brits were largely owning large parts of Africa. It's part of their colonization to get resources. And the British Empire was huge. The Brits actually owned a lot of what we call the Middle East or West Asia. And they owned a plot of land that they decided to give to the Jews after the Holocaust. This land was sanctioned by the United Nations, and they called it Israel. And it was they call it a Zionist state, I believe. Like you have to be Jewish. Like a million Russians live in Israel. They identify as Jewish. I don't understand that much about the Zionists versus the Jewish people. I'm not really going to get into that because I don't really understand that so much. But really, Israel was given this land by the United Nations in 1948. Sorry, 1947. So they were given this land, and there were always some kind of struggles over this land, okay? Because this land had been owned by the British. Please correct me where I'm wrong, but basically this land had been owned by the British. The Jewish people needed a land of their own, and Germany wanted to give them a land, but Germany didn't want to give them part of Germany. And the Jewish people really felt like this was their homeland, but many religions actually feel like this is their homeland, like Jerusalem is their homeland. But anyway, so the British, at the end of the British mandate, the United Nations sanctioned this land for Israel, okay, and gave them a certain amount of land. But apparently the borders were never clearly set in stone. I heard that recently said that that isn't much talked about. But nonetheless, they were given this land, and the problem is that this has been when all the conflict started, because they were given this land in the middle of Palestine. So it's these people coming in as colonial settlers, really. And the problem is not only that Palestine didn't want those settlers there, because they eventually agreed to coexist with them. A bigger problem is that the people who were given Israel and their descendants and the people who moved there said this was not enough land. They needed more of the land that belonged to them according to their book that God told them, that they need to own the land from the river to the sea, which apparently includes a lot of Lebanon, some of Syria. They need to expand. And this expansion is a form of colonialism, which throughout human history we've been colonialists. Like the US is created because of genocide and colonialism. The problem is that people nowadays are no longer okay with that. Like, we consider ourselves a little bit more civilized, and we're no longer okay with seeing women and children bombed and burned alive. We're no longer okay with genocide, even though human history is full of genocide. Now we're seeing genocide in front of our eyes. That's why people are upset. Not that we never did it, we all have done it. All the empires have committed genocide. So that's what the Israelis are doing now. I'm going to call them the Israelis. They are committing genocide because they're saying we need more land. So when the Jewish people were given Israel, there was a strip of land that is Gaza that was never given to Israel. That still was Palestine. But over the last 20 or so years, the Israeli government has been attacking the land that was not theirs in Gaza and what's called the West Bank, that was always Palestinian land that was never given to them. They started occupying it, building houses there, killing the people there, bombing the people there, invading into Lebanon. Like, they've done all these incursions to expand their empire. That's what good colonialists do. That's what we've all done. Okay? That's what their Bible or their book tells them to do, is their land, and they really believe it. And so they're following God's word. The reason it's a problem is because the people around them are fighting back, and we're seeing it all in front of our eyes. And they started, the people that were being bombed by the Israelis started wanting to fight back. We call them resistance forces. Now, some of this gets very tricky because the Israeli government originally funded Hamas, and the US once funded Hamas because they needed an enemy to blame, so they had a reason to kill the people in Gaza. By the way, I learned that Gaza is an open-air prison for like 10 or 20 years already, that they were encircled by a chain-link fence. They don't have freedom to come and go. The food that goes in there is rationed. And so these people that have been attacked and kept hostage kind of for so long, like, it's almost like the Jewish people are doing to the Gazans and what was done to them in the Holocaust. So they've lost a lot of world standing, and they're actually collapsing from within. But I'm going to get to that. But why is this fight happening? So the resistance groups have been trying to like fight for their survival. Unlike the Indians, which were really not that strong, they were easily taken over. The Indians were really easily taken over because the white settlers came with guns, and they had more weapons. What's happened Asia, even in Afghanistan, Iraq, the reason the US wasn't able to win there is because you've got these tribal groups that are like in these tunnels, and they're very strongly adhered to their beliefs. And it's really hard to fight them when they're in all these tunnels. Like the people, Hamas people, Hezbollah people, even in Iran, they have built all these tunnels to be in. I'm going to get to Iran in a moment. Okay, so these people are fighting, and what the Palestinians have wanted to do for a really long time is just coexist with Israel. They're like, okay, we give in. You can have this Israeli land. We'll stay over here in Gaza. We'll stay over here in the West Bank. Let's just get along. Just stop bombing us. Just stop trying to take our land. We're happy with what we have. Let's just get along. And there were US presidents who tried to broker these peace deals of a two-state solution. Bill Clinton really tried it. I think Reagan worked on it. I think Bush also put like a lid on Israeli expansion because the US doesn't want a big war in the Middle East. There's a lot of oil there, and this instability isn't good. But the US has been meddling in the Middle East a lot by overthrowing governments, doing coups, and all these coups cause instability. When we do a coup, like right now, the US wants to take out the Lebanese, wants to install a Lebanese minister or president. The coups are destabilizing. They cause a lot of refugees, and they cause more hatred towards the interventionists, which are the US. The US does not want to force Israel to stop the genocide or into a two-state solution, not just because of the AIPAC money, but the US wants a foothold in the Middle East, and Israel is an excuse to have a base in the Middle East because there are trade routes, there are ports, there are oceans, and it gives the US a foothold in the Middle East. Like, Israel is our ally. That's where we're going to still exert some dominance. But the world is very upset because in front of our eyes, Israel is committing a Holocaust in front of our eyes. And they're not burning people in ovens, but they're burning them in fire. The most recent one was when they lit a tent on fire where there were hospital patients in IVs in a tent in front of the hospital, and they lit it on fire, and someone filmed it. It's all over the internet. We have seen people and children on IVs burned alive. They bomb hospitals, schools, churches, residential buildings, and they say we're doing all this because Hamas is hiding there. Well, the most recent, now I want to show you this, the most recent killing that they did, they killed a Hamas leader, and Bush is like, yeah, we got him. But you have to realize that the people over there, they don't have the same command structure for war that we do, because Americans fight for war because they're paid and they're trained, but these people are fighting for their conviction for their land. So it's a very different inner calling. It's a very different inner calling, okay? An American soldier might get his leg amputated and then be like a vet, disabled vet for life, or do something else. But if someone over there gets their leg amputated, they're still going to fight because they're fighting for their freedom. They are being occupied. It's very different. And I think the reason the Americans don't know so much, and I didn't know so much about all this, is because this is happening way over there, and we're surrounded by oceans. We get along with Canada and Mexico, so we don't have this constant threat of war. So war is something that these people do over there, and it's something that we do to brown people. We're very racist. And these Palestinians are brown people. Israelis call them animals, human animals. And what the Israelis want to do, they want to kill them. Right now, they're starving them. There's a huge famine and they're starving the population. But is this population as evil as we are told? Because remember, they're resisting the occupation of their lands. The most recent person that was killed was Yahya Sinwar. He was the Hamas leader, and Biden's like, yeah, we got him. And the Israelis are like, yeah, we got him. Okay, who is this? Who is this gentleman? Okay, here's a picture. He looks pretty badass and angry. He was born into a refugee camp. That's how long the Israelis have been occupying Gaza, that they have had refugee camps there for decades. So he was born into a refugee camp, and then he spent 22 years in Israeli prisons, where presumably he was tortured, but they didn't kill him. He's been the leader since July because the Israelis killed the other two leaders. So he was a resistance fighter. Now, they say that they have to get the Hamas leader because once they get the leader, the whole structure will fall apart, and that the leader is hiding in tunnels and he's hiding behind civilians. That's what we're told. But that's all a lie because they don't have the same kind of top-down structure. The people that are leaders are fighting alongside their men out of a desire for their freedom. And in actuality, when, here's a picture of him. When he was killed by the Israelis, he wasn't in a tunnel. He was in some burned out house, missing an arm, fighting alongside his men. And even after he was shot, he still tried to fight back. And that's why he's so revered. That's why he's so loved. And he's going to go down in great honor and as a counter story to the narrative we're told that these people are all like colonels hiding in tunnels, military commanders hiding in tunnels. They're just everyday people fighting for their own land, really. So now Israel is a small country. They have kind of a conscription army. They're not well trained. They're soldiers. I think they have a few like elite forces. And without the US, they're nothing. They need the US. So basically, if the US just cuts off Israel, this entire war would stop. So the Americans are responsible for every death. We are funding it. We are helping them with our intelligence. We're giving them planes. We're giving them weapons. We're giving them bombs. The US is bombing and killing. Now, if you talk to, I remember Madeleine Albright being told once, well, this war in Iraq, we are killing like 1 million women and children. She's like, just the price we have to pay. That's how they look at it, because those are those dark-skinned people over there. Those are the people we have to get out of the way to maintain our hegemony, maintain our power. That's just the cost of doing business. Burning children alive is just the cost of doing business. What's for dinner? So that's how they look at it. And it's making us look bad in the eyes of the world. Now, the media doesn't report necessarily on what's happening at the UN, at the International Court of Justice, what other countries are doing. And there's a lot of outrage in all of these places, and it's weakening Israel and it's weakening the US. And the reason that Israel cannot win is not only because, look, Israel cannot win this. I predict they're going to self-destruct from their own hubris. What Israel really should do is call a truce. But they can't because we're told they're the good guys, but they're acting like savage terrorists because they're killing civilians and they have no regard for the rules of law or the rules of military engagement. They don't want a ceasefire. In fact, every Hamas and Hezbollah leader that has been working on a ceasefire was assassinated. What Israel really wants is to take over more land, and they want the US to help them. So they want to kill every brown person in Gaza, in the West Bank, go into Lebanon, go into Syria, like that's their land. God told them. When I hear that, I think they're no different than these ISIS guys or these Al Qaeda guys, which, by the way, were all created by the US. By the way, when the US took out Saddam Hussein, that's when ISIS was created. And Saddam Hussein never had weapons of mass destruction. So we have to be, if we want to know what's going on, we can't read the New York Times, the Post, the Guardian, the Telegraph. We can't read any of that. We can't listen to CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. We can't listen to any of that because these media companies are all owned by the same corporations. We have to go to independent media. You have to follow journalists either on their Substack or on YouTube, or I think YouTube is a good place to find them. And these are very distinguished people like Jeffrey Sachs. He's an economist at Columbia University. He's been very involved with the United Nations, with all these different presidents. And these people are actively involved in current discourse on these matters. And they've worked on the inside, so they have still some connections on the inside to give us more information what's really going on. So Israel wants to expand, and they want the US to get involved. But the US cannot get involved. This is why the US cannot get involved. First of all, the US has drained much of its military resources in Ukraine, which, by the way, have you noticed they don't talk about Ukraine anymore because the US has lost. There's a checkmate being called. Like the US will do wars to a certain point, but they're going to stop when there's an actual threat to our security, like a country has better weapons, and Russia has better weapons, and Iran has better weapons. Neither of these countries want war, but they're willing to defend themselves. So Russia said, you want to strike us with long-range weapons out of Ukraine? Well, we're revising our nuclear doctrine. So the US backed off. This was pretty recently, and Ukraine is pretty much out of soldiers. They're losing like 1,000 soldiers a day. That's another thing. The news doesn't tell us how many Americans are dying. We have Americans in Ukraine. We have Americans in Israel. We have Americans that are dying. We have Ukrainians that are dying, but they don't report that on the news because they don't want people to be upset about these wars. It's better to just paint these wars as we're the good guys fighting these backwards, dark-skinned animals. And that's how these Middle Eastern people are portrayed. They're portrayed as stupid, weak, backwards animals. But they're actually pretty good because if they're so backwards, how come Israel has been fighting in Gaza, this tiny strip of a land, for 1 year, and they still haven't won? I guess they have to burn every last baby. But Hamas is in the tunnels, the resistance fighters. They go into the tunnels and they come out and they fight. They're not using humans as shields. But let's see, where is Israel? I had to look all these places up. Libya, like what the heck are we doing in Libya? That's in Africa. Like why are we in Africa? Okay, so let's see. There's Ukraine. I always have to find these places. Syria, Israel. It's this tiny, tiny little place on the map. Israel, this little yellow thing. It's so small. Look at Iran. Iran is huge compared to Israel. Israel is so tiny. And then Gaza is even a smaller piece than that. So Israel can't even take over Gaza and they want to take over Iran? Like, are you serious right now? And Iran has been preparing, okay, because they watched the invasion into Afghanistan and into Iraq, and they knew they would be next. And the U.S. wanted Iran to be next. They wanted to take Iran over. They might have been able to do it in 2003 or 5, but since then, Iran prepared for being invaded by the U.S. Iran was very afraid they would be next. So they have, unbeknownst to us, apparently, they have these huge tunnels underground, like way underground, where they have their nuclear program, not for nuclear weapons, but for nuclear energy, I believe, because the colonels and military people I listen to, everyone is still saying Iran does not have nuclear weapons and Israel does. Although that could just be grandstanding. No one has ever seen Israel's nuclear weapons. So Israel is trying to be a country of deterrence. Like, we're so strong. We have the Iron Dome. We have all these weapons. But it's just a farce. They can't protect themselves because they're being hit by missiles all the time and they're getting through very easily. So Israel is collapsing with all their stories, with all their genocide. The wealthy Israelis have already fled. Business investment has stopped. Tourism has stopped. And the people in northern Israel, 60,000, are living in hotels because of all the feuding across the border. Like, they don't have peace. They don't have stability. And the Houthis, which are basically people living on $200 a year income, like they're basically like Bedouin pirates, are bombing ships going through the canal into Israel to stop them. So the U.S. hasn't been able to stop the Houthis, the Hamas, or the Hezbollah, neither has Israel. These factions, which are resistance groups, that are basically like, it's almost like an American carrying a gun saying, don't invade my home, don't invade my country. They're just, that's an example of resistance. But we label them as evil because they're these dark-skinned people protecting their lands. But they're not starting any wars. They're merely protecting themselves from being occupied. So you have to remember that the U.S. media is mainly propaganda, and I'm not saying that Russian media or Iranian media is any better. That's why it's good to listen to all different kinds of media and make our own opinions. So Iran is thinking, okay, we might be next. So they started developing hypersonic missiles. Is that the right word? Hypersonic missiles. The U.S. does not have hypersonic missiles. Iran has huge, thousands of hypersonic missiles. Now, why is that a problem? It's a problem because the anti-ballistic systems that we have, which means we have missiles that can shoot down missiles coming at us. One is called the THAAD system, which U.S. just gave to Israel. It's called an anti-ballistic missile system. So if a missile comes in, we shoot it before it can hit us. Anti-ballistic missile. A ballistic missile charts a course that you can see from a long time away, so you have time to get it. And with the anti-ballistic missile system, it'll get it at a certain point before it comes down. The THAAD system will get it up higher in the air. But we do not have anything to take down a hypersonic missile. And that's why Iran has, on 2 occasions, in April of this year and October 1st of this year, launched hypersonic missiles into Israel and hit the targets. Now, Iran hit only military targets. There was one Palestinian girl that was injured, I believe, that accidentally caught some shrapnel. But otherwise, it was all military targets. and they're prepared, but they were prepared to fight if they thought against US invasion. But now they were being attacked by Israel. So Israel's doing all this stuff to try to antagonize because they really want a wider war. They want to take over more lands and they really want to get rid of Iran. They do not like Iran. I do not know why they don't like Iran. Like I said, I am German and Persian and American, and I want to get along with all people. And that is the answer for Israel, is to get along with its neighbors instead of trying to colonize them. Because colonization, if you want to colonize a country, you have to be powerful enough to destroy them. Like when the British came to the US, we destroyed the Indians. We just killed them all off and put them on these little reservations because we had better weapons. But that didn't work in Afghanistan, Iraq, because these people were entrenched. They were not like Indians roaming the land. The Indians roaming the land were not prepared. They weren't dug into any tunnels or trenches. They were just easy to conquer. Well, people are not so easy to conquer anymore. It's easy to put sanctions on people. It's easy to do a coup and cause economic instability, and then that causes all this mass migration that's causing all these problems. I'm going to go on a side note. These Venezuelan gangs, I was listening to Kim Iverson yesterday. They're not from our unbridled immigration, illegal immigration. They're asylum seekers that came over when the U.S. under Trump took out the Venezuelan Maduro and made a coup and created all this economic instability, and it created all these gangs. And then people fled Venezuela. People fled and sought asylum here. And one of these groups is this Venezuelan gang, apparently, and they're taking over apartment buildings. There's a woman on the city council in Aurora, Colorado, trying to help them. And in San Antonio, Texas, they're doing it also. And they're putting a stop to it. So they're asylum seekers. But that's because we created instability in Venezuela. We're creating instability in these other countries that makes people want to flee. Because for a country to progress, you need stability. And we have stability in the US. And that's why Russia and Iran do not want wars, because they still need to grow more economically. They need stability. Will they eventually be colonialists too? Maybe. Maybe when they have all their ducks in a row, they will be colonialists too. I don't know. China has never been a colonial empire. Russia once was. Russia lost 26 million people in World War II, and they're the ones that went into Berlin and stopped Hitler. Russia saved us from Hitler. So don't paint Russia as this bad guy. But nonetheless, when you lose 26 million people in a war, you don't really want to do war again. And the US has been so long removed from war. Even that war that our men fought in Afghanistan, it was so far away, and they tried to keep it very hush-hush about all the injuries so that we don't get too upset about it. Iran has hypersonic missiles. What a hypersonic missile does, first of all, it goes super, super fast, but also it can change course. So it's unlike a ballistic missile, which has like a predetermined course. You know, you set a trajectory and it has a predictable path. A hypersonic missile does not, because it can go like this, and at the last minute it can change direction. It separates from its fuel source, I believe. It can still change directions. And then there's another one that Iran has, where not only can it change directions, but when it gets close to its target, it has multiple warheads that go off in all different directions. The US doesn't have anything like that. I think Russia has those too. So the US was taken aback on April 1st when Iran launched one of those into an Israeli airbase, the one where they store the F-35s, the most heavily guarded, according to Scott Ritter, who is a former UN weapons inspector and very well versed. He's worked with the Israelis and the Iranians and the Russians. I think the Iranians. he's very well versed on all these weapons. Like, he can analyze a piece of a weapon and tell you when it was made and how it was made and everything and who made it. Like, it's pretty interesting, all the knowledge he has. But he was saying that this air base in Israel is the most heavily fortified air base in the world. U.S. Central Command monitors this air base from afar. I think we may even have American personnel there. Like, it's heavily guarded. Iran struck it, and there's nothing that the Israelis could do about it, because they started out with like 300 old drones to try to gather intelligence and wear out the Israeli anti-ballistic missile system. Once those were all out of firepower, they put in the hypersonic missile that hit the airbase, and it was just to say, we can get you, so stop killing our leaders, stop bombing our embassy, because the Israelis had bombed the embassy in Syria, the Persian embassy. They had killed a bunch of leaders. They had gone into, and then they also went into Iran and killed one of the Iranian guests during the recent inauguration of the new president. Iran didn't want to retaliate, and the U.S. told Iran, do not retaliate for this murder committed on your soil, because we're working on a peace deal. But the Americans lied. Supposedly the Iranians lied. Everyone's saying the Americans are lying. In fact, there's even a quote from Angela Merkel saying that the Minsk II agreement was a lie to give Ukraine time to build up more strength so that they could put more NATO weapons on Russia's border. That was never a serious deal. Like, people make deals just to talk. It's a manipulation. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then they don't mean it. So there's a lot of pressure on Iran because they're not defending the Palestinians. Now, all these people in what we call the Middle East or West Asia, they actually feel a bond. This is the problem. All of these countries that we say are the bad guys, I don't think they're the bad guys, but I don't really know. I don't see them doing bad stuff, but maybe they could if they had more weapons. I don't know. But all these countries, like Jordan, even the ones that are U.S. allies, the people in the countries, the people in Saudi Arabia, the people in Jordan, Turkey, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, all those countries, they all feel a kinship to each other. Even the ones that were formerly rivals are now joining forces because they feel like it's these white people against us. It's these colonials against us. Are we going to be next? These are our people. It would almost be like when we were invaded on 9/11, it didn't matter anymore if you were Republican or Democrat or whatever. It was us against them. So that's what's happening in Asia right now, is these people are starting to feel a bond. Even Iran and Saudi Arabia are now friends. Why? Saudi Arabia is a U.S. ally, but the people that live in Saudi Arabia are getting very angry. And so these leaders in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon perhaps, that are more like U.S. allies, U.S. friendly, have to be worried about their populations becoming angry with the murder of these people. It's not like Israel is attacking military installations. They're killing civilians. That's the problem. And Israel is a very weak country. They have no diplomacy. They're unable to get along with their neighbors. They don't have the strength or the firepower to overcome them like we did with the Indians. They're entirely dependent on the U.S. and Europe, mostly the U.S. And Europe is starting to turn their backs on them. Ireland said, no more weapons to you. France is saying it. Italy is saying it. Germany is still very for Israel. Germany has become a warmonger nation, and the U.S., of course, too. The U.S. is responsible for every death over there because, hey, we like killing the dark-skinned people over there. Notice the U.S. never invades Europe or Russia, but the Russia thing could be because Russia has nuclear weapons. Anyway, so now, why hasn't Israel retaliated against the last Iran strike? So the last Iran strike came October 1, and that was in retaliation for them killing a bunch of Iranian people, assassinating them. When Iran did the attack in April, they gave the US and everyone a 3-day notice. So everyone knew it was coming. For October 1st, they gave a 3-hour notice. So the US knew it was coming, Israel knew it was coming, everyone knew it was coming. And none of the US tried to stop all of these missiles that Iran put into Israel. Now, this is why I want to tell you why Israel has no chance. Iran. And I am very moved. I know people are going to hate me for this, but I'm very moved by Iran as going to be the peacemaker. Iran is going to be the one that puts a bridle on this rabid dog called Netanyahu that's trying to destroy the Middle East and is killing all these people. In the name of his religion, he's a terrorist. He's like Hitler. Netanyahu is just like Hitler. Okay, and just because there was a Holocaust, that doesn't give him some kind of aura to repeat the crimes. He's not able to kill all the people because he doesn't have all the weapons. I do not know why he's not just bombing all of Gaza right now and killing everyone. I don't know why he's not doing that, because they have the bombs to do it. Maybe they don't have enough bombs. I don't really understand why they haven't won in Gaza. So maybe someone can explain this to me, why they haven't won in Gaza, why they haven't won in Lebanon. They try to go into Lebanon, but they can't, because these Lebanese fighters, they're not just American fighters that are paid to fight. I don't think these guys are paid at all. They don't have an army paying them. They're fighting to fight for their land, the same that you would if someone came and invaded us. No one would have to pay you to fight off the occupiers, and that's a different energy. You don't need a command structure. You need passion and an inner calling for your freedom. You're fighting for your own freedom from an occupying force. That's why they're so powerful. So they can't win in Lebanon. Now they want to go into Iran. Like, you guys are way out of your league here. And even the US. And the US is facing a great humiliation because they've been shown to be ineffective. They were not able to stop with the 3-hour notice all those hypersonic missiles that Iran sent. And Iran did say, if you attack us, our next response will be stronger, and it was. And they did hit that air base again. And there was an Israeli blackout. They don't want to show anything, but it scared them. And that's why they haven't done anything. Iran has called the bluff. Iran has better weapons than the US. Iran has better weapons than Israel. And neither Israel nor the US has the anti-ballistic missiles to stop it. Now, why isn't Iran just going to destroy Israel? They easily could. Iran could just send off a bunch of bombs right now and completely destroy Israel. Wipe it out. Wipe out all the air bases right now. The military targets, okay? I'm not talking about the civilians because they don't go after civilians. Why isn't Iran taking out all the military targets right now? Because they do not want war. First of all, they're not even that economically strong right now. Iran is not that economically strong. They have been sanctioned for decades. They have a number of internal problems. I heard on one of the interviews, I do not know what they all are. I'm sure they have financial problems, political problems. They've been sanctioned for a really long time. It's very difficult to prosper as a country when you're sanctioned by the US and other countries. And they're very interested in growing economically. And to grow economically, you need peace and you need stability. And none of these countries there, they don't want war. The only reason we're starting war is because it's over there with those people. All the wars that we fund, when was the last time we funded a war against Mexico or Canada? Or a war where someone would actually attack us back? We don't. We The politicians start wars with other people's children, other men and women. In Ukraine, the US wants to, oh, it's just us Ukrainian men that are going to die in this war that I know we can never win, but we're going to weaken Russia. We don't care if 1 million Ukrainian men die. That's just us Ukrainians. I guess that wasn't really a racist thing either. They will use the white guys. They use American white guys. Oh, well, we don't care. You go in Afghanistan. I can guarantee you that those politicians that have sons in the military, they're not fighting on the front lines. They're captains and colonels sitting somewhere remotely overseeing things. Okay? And they themselves are not going to go into battle. So that's why the US wants all these wars, because we're going to use these other people. We're not going to report the deaths. And that's just the cost of doing business. What's for lunch? Oh, we burned some people alive. Did you see this menu? Like, yeah, what's for dinner? That's how it's looked at, because it's just those people over there. But Iran needs the political stability, and all those people do. I mean, we don't want war here. We want it over there. Kill those bad guys. Oh, yeah, those bad Arabs. That's what they tell us they're bad. They're bad because they're resisting our occupation. Just like the Indians were bad. Those bad Indians fighting us. How dare they, those bad Indians. They're resisting our occupation, and guess what? They're stronger now than they were. This isn't 1995 anymore. The American military is weaker, and the other countries are stronger. And Iran has called the bluff. Iran is the great peacemaker. Iran has also been forging alliances. Russia is a huge partner. They have worked together militarily for many years. Russia has huge interest in Iran for access to the Caspian Sea and the oil. So Iran has also been forging alliances with its neighbors, and the word is out. If Israel strikes us, as Iran's saying, if Israel strikes us, any country that allows these Israeli planes or these F-35s or American planes to fly over their land, to be used as bases, or to take down any defense that we might offer, would be considered a national security threat and treated as such. So all the surrounding countries, now we've lost Saudi Arabia, Jordan, they don't want to interfere because they don't want to be attacked by Iran. So it's like, okay, Israel, you want to fight us? The U.S. wants to go to war with Iran. The U.S. is on its own because Saudi Arabia isn't going to help. And if Iran is attacked, we are very vulnerable in that area of the world with our ships, our military bases, the oil. We're not in a position to do colonial empire building in that area of the world. Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is actually a country with much oil and a government and a very strong arsenal of superior military equipment that we cannot defend against, and they can do a lot of damage. And that's why Israel hasn't done anything against Iran, and my prediction is that they will not, because they can't. Iran has called our bluff, and therefore Iran is the big peacemaker. But a lot of people are very angry with Iran because there's a huge faction of the people that want Iran to just bomb the hell out of Israel. Go get those suckers. Go get Netanyahu. Just kill them all. But this is where they're exercising strategic patience, just like Russia. Russia could have taken over Ukraine and bombed the hell out of them. But when you are trying to build your economy, you have to be willing to swallow your pride. I think that there was a lot more that Israel did. I think that helicopter crash some months ago was Israel too. You have to be willing to swallow your pride, take some losses, and not react. If you want peace and you want economic stability, you have to look at the long haul and what Iran and Russia are doing now. They're building alliances. They're wanting to trade. They need economic stability. They don't want war. The US always wants war. And you cannot always retaliate to everyone who is trying to get you to retaliate. Like Israel will do these assassinations just because they're a rabid mad dog, and also to try to get a reaction. You cannot react if you want stability. So a lot of people are very upset with Iran for not retaliating against Israel. But I'm very proud of Iran. I'm very proud of them for having developed these missiles that are actually now used for peace. My only concern is that if Israel does have nuclear weapons, that they would use them because they're so desperate. But what's happening is our bluff has been called. We cannot attack Iran because if we do, Iran's gonna sink all the US ships, start bombing US bases all around the area, and close off the Gulf. Our oil prices will go to $10 or $20 a gallon. Our economy will collapse. It's going to be a huge disaster. Like, that would be bad for us. And that's kind of where we stop. We stop when it's bad for us, but we're willing to send weapons. We're willing to send American soldiers. Right now, they're not too willing to send American soldiers because the US is kind of tired of all this war. And if they come back with all these casualties, I don't think Americans will like it. So what I think is going to happen is I think Israel will kind of extinguish under its own hubris. But hopefully, I do think that the people in the area are willing to negotiate and give Israel some land if it can just stop fighting everyone. I do think it's possible if Israel would go along with it to give them some land that they can have to establish some, but they don't want it. That's the problem. The problem is that Israel is this rabid dog that is saying, our God told us this is our land, so we got to kill you. Our God said we have to kill you because we're the good guys. So I don't really know how you can rationalize with people like that. I mean, they have to just, once they lose their power, they kind of self-extinguish under, they just wear themselves out trying to fight. So at that point, will people feel sorry for them and give them some land? I don't know. If the US was not funding Israel, they would have already been done for. Because basically it's the US causing all these skirmishes in West Asia when, they just want peace. And meanwhile, look at what's happening in our own country. We have Venezuelan gangs taking over apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado. The police would do nothing. I listened to the whole Kim Iversen show on that. The police would do nothing. The management company kept calling. The police were not interested. One of the residents finally called a woman on the city council who offered to help her. Our inner cities are falling apart. Our educational system is in shambles. I have a friend who just came back from a trip to Europe, and she told me how clean everything was. Like, our inner cities are dirty, they're run down. People get assaulted in downtown San Francisco, down Venice Beach. All these beautiful icons are just destroyed. And we don't really care because we're talking about woke ideology. Kamala has people twerking. She's going on some Who Calls You Daddy show. No one's addressing like our economy, our economic collapse, our education system, why we're fighting all these wars. Because these upper elites, it's just like the cost of doing business. Bombs, killing people, causing economic instability by sanctioning countries, doing coups. We're trying to do coups right now. Venezuela, Brazil, Lebanon. That's just what we do. We ruin other countries. We are the evil colonialists. And our empire is about to decline as well because we're financially overextended. And the next time one of our banks go under, I do not think that we're going to be able to save it. The price of gold is going up. The Federal Reserve lowered the interest rates, but that doesn't affect the bond market. So the rates for mortgages are still high. When my CD rolls over, I'm glad that it's still going to be high because I think the CD rates are based on the bond market. I think right now CDs are paying 4.5%, but for years it was only 0.5%, which really discouraged savings. I don't trust the stock market. I think it's all like a house of cards, actually. Anyway, so this was just my view of why we are fighting in Israel. We're a colonial empire, and we have met our match. We have met our match with these people that are fighting against the occupiers. We're the occupiers. That's the problem. Not because, again, Israel was given this land, but they weren't happy with the land they were given. They're trying to expand. That's the problem. Israel keeps trying to expand its borders, kill the native people who live there, and this whole population in West Asia of these native people are very angry. They have forged resistance against being killed, and we call these resistance fighters terrorists, but they're actually, Hezbollah is actually a government. They do trash service, they do sewer service, it's a government, and we paint them as evil because they're strong enough that we can't overtake them. Hezbollah and Hamas are like the Indians. They are like the Indian fighters that when we came to colonize this land. And the problem is that people are no longer okay with genocide, even though our entire human race is full of genocide. And for people who say that we're better off here, it's great to live here, it's very arrogant because everything that we have is because we kill them over there. So there's someone I follow on Twitter called Caitlin Johnstone. She's pretty good. And she says that all the killing is really about stealing Palestinian land, a project that Israel has been working on for generations. I know that when I made my last video on this, someone said, but the US is the best place to live. Everybody wants to live here. Well, this is what I have to say to you is that it's a very sick and twisted argument because it means that you are so cognitively divorced and emotionally divorced from the violence and the tyranny that our government is inflicting upon the global South that you think the question of which country is worse than others is a question of how pleasant it would be for these to live in. It's like, yes, asshole, it's very nice to be living in the imperial core that's receiving the benefits of mass murder and imperialist extraction. And it's less nice to live in the countries where the murder and extraction is happening. That's the entire fucking point here. It can be nice to live in the Western world, but the Western world is not nice. Ours is the most savage and thuggish civilization on this planet, and it's not even close. Anyone defending Israel's actions or wars or genocide will be blocked from this channel because I want nothing to do with you. I want nothing to do with genocidal maniacs who are defending the actions of the US. So if that's you, you can just fuck off right now and unsubscribe. You will be blocked for being a tyrannical, violent asshole. The rest of you, I hope that this video gave you some information about the evils that Europe, Germany, and the US are perpetrating. And all these countries that we're told are evil are actually the peacemakers. China, Russia, Iran, and the resistance forces are finally going to bring peace to the region. Let's stop meddling in other countries and focus on our own country here at home because we have a lot of problems, and I would love to see our energy and our money diverted from our 200-year history of fighting and wars and killing other people to actually lifting them up and doing trade. I would like to see us turn the page. I would like to see that very much. Thank you for watching my video. Now, some of the images will be reversed. I'm just gonna post this video the way it is. I'm not gonna save it and reverse it because that's a lot of power on my old phone. Sorry. There are other channels that do a much better job of presenting you with the current news. I highly recommend watching on YouTube Judge Napolitano, The Duran Report, Dialogue Works, Syriana Analysis, Kim Iverson, Rachel Blevins, The Cradle, Glenn Greenwald, Scott Ritter, and also any interviews you see with economist Jeffrey Sachs, Scott Ritter, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Matthew Ho, and the Iranian spokesperson Syed Morammandi. I gotta get his name right, hold on. Okay, his name is Syed Mohammad Marandi. You can follow him on Twitter if you want. He does very good interviews. He's a professor of English literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. He has studied, I believe, in London and in Lebanon. He travels around the region a lot. He gives really good interviews. That's where I get a lot of my information about the Iranian missile strikes. And now, you know, he's just one person, but he's another good person to listen to if you see him on any interviews. He was on Piers Morgan. And yeah, so those are some good people to listen to if you want to form your own opinions what's going on. I would not recommend believing the U.S. propaganda, which if you're listening to anything on the MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, that's all government propaganda. They're not giving you the truth. Neither are any of the newspapers, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. They're not telling you any of this stuff. So you have to go to independent media. By the way, these independent media channels get more views than a lot of these channels. There's a gentleman I watch, Barry Cunningham, I believe. And he says he gets more views than the people watching The View. People are turning away from this mainstream journalism because they can tell it's not true. They can kind of get the sense it's not true. And also younger people are more on social media. And people are really drawn to the truth. People want to know what's going on. So these channels that are actually giving the truth are getting a lot more views. I think that's a good thing. And for now, nobody is banning free speech on the wars except Zuckerberg, who's a Zionist. He is banning free speech on Facebook and Instagram. He's part of the government propaganda. So I would not consider that. I think TikTok would be good. YouTube would be good. Rumble has a lot of weird stuff too. You got to watch out for the crazies. But anyway, I hope you like this video. I will be back for the comments. And hopefully we can rise to a higher level of human development and learn to trade with each other for prosperity instead of killing other people so we can be the good guys.